everybody, welcome back to my channel, The Medieval Reader. So today I want to do a tag. Now I usually don't do book tags because I often find it very difficult to answer the tag questions. I think that most tags are made for young adult readers, which is fine, but I usually cannot come up with an adult equivalent for it. And also I just read some really weird books. But I recently saw Jason, Kelly, and Lukash do the New York Times by the book tag. So that's what I want to do today. So let's begin. Number 1, what book do I have on my nightstand? So I'm not very good with TBRs. I know that I just uploaded a TBR, but I generally avoid uploading TBRs except for Reading Rush because I'm a mood reader and I will just read whatever tickles my fancy. So I have a few books laying around that I have dipped in and out of a bit and hopefully will commit time to finishing, but at the moment I don't really have any one book on my nightstand. So I will tell you 3 books that I will be reading in the next few days, or at least beginning. We'll see. So the first is Matterhorn by Karl Marlantes. I will be buddy reading that book with Janelle at All the World's a Page. It's a really, really long book. It's a novel of the Vietnam War. I have never read anything set in the Vietnam War, and I must admit I don't know very much about the Vietnam War. We weren't really taught it in school, which that's a whole conversation to be had. But I really do want to read this work, and I really love reading big books. I've discovered that in the last few years, and this year I've read a lot of really long books, so I look forward to reading Matterhorn, but it will most likely take a few weeks. I'm also reading The Burgermeister's Daughter, Scandal in a 16th Century German Town by Stephen Osment. So Stephen Osment is emeritus, I think now, professor of history, I think, at Harvard University, and he taught, I think, at Yale and a number of leading institutions. And Osment is like Natalie Zemon Davis or Emmanuel Leroy-Ladurie, who tell stories based on what they find in the archives. They bring the archives to life. And in this case, this book centers on a woman who was executed for, I guess, being a loose woman in the 16th century, and the person who took her to trial and condemned her was her father. Her father was the one who took her to court. That, I think, is incredibly fascinating. And of course, women in the 16th century, maybe more so than in previous centuries, really didn't have a voice. And so, this book does, like I said, what Davis and Ladurie have done in giving voice to people whose stories usually aren't told, and what you can piece together through reading letters and legal documents, etc. This is something that I really love, and I aspire to be a scholar like one of these authors. So anyway, this book I do hope to read very soon. And then, something that I will be talking more about in this video, I really like reading books on conservation, so I got this book, War of the Whales, A True Story by Joshua Horowitz, which talks about an attorney and a scientist who team up together to determine what's going on with whales. So they're involved in whale conservation. This seems really good. Again, fairly long book. I've been reading a lot of books about conservation recently, and I really hope to read this also very soon. Number 2, the last truly great book that I read. So I have 1 academic book, 1 nonfiction trade book, and 1 fiction book. So for the academic book, the last truly great academic book I read was Judging the French Reformation, Heresy, Trials by 16th Century Parliaments, and it's by William Monter. It was a very important book for me in my own research. It's about 16th century parliaments and their involvement through the century in heresy trials, and how initially they had a lot of power, but then by the end of the century the parliaments are being discredited because actually those on the forefront of heresy persecution weren't the parliaments. The parliaments were starting to be seen, at least by conservative Catholics, to be more lenient toward heresy, as the Reformed Protestant Church was becoming more unified and more powerful in France, the parliaments were starting to be more lenient. There were jurists that were in the parliaments who were either Huguenot or Huguenot sympathizers. And so it was actually mob violence that was really at the forefront of heresy persecution by the end of the century, whereas earlier in the century, the parliaments were, leading the way. They were the ones who were trying and often executing heretics. It is a dark, dark book, but it is really helping me in my research, and I think that if you're looking for an overview of religious trials in the 16th century, William Monter's book is definitely great, and it's just very well researched, very well written, quite a magisterial book. For nonfiction, I read this book actually last August, and that's American Wolfe by Nate Blakesley. American Wolfe was the first book that I've read about conservation in a long time. Actually, I can't even think of a book that I read before American Wolfe. So this book really inspired me to learn more about the legal issues that conservationists have to consider, and particularly in North America. American Wolfe is about the reintroduction of the American gray wolf in Yellowstone National Park. And as you can imagine, it was very, very controversial. Cattle ranchers were very opposed to it because they believed that the wolves would attack their cattle. Because the wolves were protected, the hunting industry was affected. And, this is a book that really takes a sympathetic view to all of the different issues surrounding wolf conservation. And, even if, for example, I'm not into hunting, okay? But I understand this is more than just a question of, whether or not wolves can be hunted by people. It's this question of which industries are allowed to thrive. And I really thought that this book was very well done. At the center is Ralph McIntyre, who isn't a scientist. He's a forest ranger, and he's been trained to, care for the national park. He works at Yellowstone. But for 10 years, religiously, every single day, rain or shine or snow or whatever, he would go and observe these wolf packs. And you get to learn the story of 2 or 3 major wolf packs, including the original wolf pack after the reintroduction of the gray wolf. And I was like, there's nothing in the world that I care about more than people having passion for what they do. If you have passion, you will convince me to have passion. And Ralph McIntyre is a man with an immense amount of passion and love for what he does, and it clearly rubbed off. Even though he wasn't personally involved in any of the legal hearings concerning the protection of the gray wolf, he got visitors interested in the wolf and, helped defeat myths surrounding the wolf, which are dangerous animals for sure. But, he was really at the forefront of this precisely because he had passion. And I think that passion is so underrated, but also the most important thing. So, American Wolfe. And finally, fiction, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is the first, I believe, really large book that I read in 2019. I haven't talked about it on this channel, but I did write a review on it on my blog, which I will link below. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is historical fantasy. It has this very gothic feeling to it, which I love. Follows 2 wizards, Mr. Norrell and his student, Jonathan Strange, and they are both wanting to bring back practical magic. Not just theoretical magic, which was already quite popular among gentlemen, where they would meet together and they would talk about magic, but theoretically they would never practice it. But Mr. Norrell, he wants to practice magic, and so does his student. And it just follows all of the consequences of practical magic. I really, really love this book, and I definitely think that it's worth reading. Yes, it drags a little bit at the end, but for the most part, it was a page turner, a Kindle turner. Actually, I read most of it on my Kindle because this book is huge and cumbersome. That is the biggest weakness of the hardcover. I bought my hardcover edition for $5 from Half Price Books. It's one of the best deals I've ever gotten from books. Okay, let's keep going. Fourth book. What books might we be surprised to find on your shelves? Children's books. Evidently people are surprised that I read children's books. Some people. Maybe some self-help books. I have read a few self-help books. I have one down here about dealing with failure. I don't read too many self-help books, but I do like self-help occasionally, so maybe people would be surprised about that. Also, nature books. I studied biology as an undergraduate, as well as French. And I actually did 1 year of a PhD in entomology before realizing this was absolutely not for me. Yes, entomology, insects. So I have been interested in science forever, and I still am. I'm just not into, well, I'm not into the research personally. Like, I would not, I was not cut out to be a researcher, and humanities research is what I love. And so while I am not doing this as a career, it is still something that I want to keep up with. It is still something that I'm passionate about, and now I get to go back and find really accessible but still well-researched books on animals, on conservation, and hopefully I'll be able to talk about this a little bit more on my channel. Despite my channel name being The Medieval Reader, I do read other things. I have seen basically every nature show on Netflix or on cable television. I have seen everything. Number 5, how do you organize your personal library? For the most part, my personal library is organized by height of books, so like the tallest books will be here and then the shortest books will be here. Most of the books with the white spines are French. Now these are actually organized in loose chronological order, so the medieval books are here and then the 20th, 21st century books are here. So that is these are the only shelves that are organized in any particular way. But otherwise, I don't really have an elaborate organization scheme. 6, what book have you always meant to read and haven't got around to yet? This is actually on my bucket list of things I want to do, and that is to read Les Misérables by Victor Hugo in French. I have never read Les Mis in any language, and I really, really want to read it. I started reading it last summer and I loved it. It was fantastic, and then I put it aside. But I really do want to read Les Misérables. It's this goal that I always set myself every year, and then I get distracted by other books. So I still haven't read it, but I will soon. I'll read it. If you ever want to read it along with me, let me know. Anything you feel embarrassed never to have read. I have never read Dante's Divine Comedy. Yeah, that is a huge embarrassment. You can shame me in the comments. 7, disappointing, overrated, just not good. What book did you feel you were supposed to like but didn't? I feel like if you've been following me for a while, you know that that book is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Actually, Sense and Sensibility I dislike even more, but I have never gotten on with Jane Austen. I find her books to be so boring, and I hate that. I want to like her works, and I just don't. Maybe I'll try again. Maybe I'll read Emma. Maybe I'll reread, I don't know. But I cannot. Do you remember the last book you put down without finishing? Yes, Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix. Unfortunately, I really, really enjoyed rereading as an adult the first so many books of the Harry Potter series. But then I reread The Goblet of Fire, which was initially my favorite book in the series, and I hated it. I was so disappointed. I made a whole video about how disappointed I was. And then Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is better, but then I stopped halfway through and I haven't picked it up in the last 6-7 months at least. So I will continue, but I don't know why I haven't picked it up. This is a running theme in this video. 8, what kind of stories are you drawn to? Definitely drawn to historical fantasy now, books on the politics and the science of wildlife conservation, especially in North America, anything dealing with the Middle Ages or the Renaissance, or any kind of historical fiction set in the Middle Ages or the Renaissance. Really, really obscure things, because if they're obscure, they're just intrinsically interesting. They don't have to be entertaining to read. The entertainment is in being able to read these works that are just unknown, and like discovering them and getting to realize how people lived based on archival material. I find that so exciting. Stay clear of. Okay, so this is actually quite unpopular. The books I stay clear of are the science memoirs. Now, I don't entirely stay clear of them. I did read H is for Hawk by Helen Macdonald, but I realized that what I disliked, or liked the least about H is for Hawk, is all of the biographical details about Helen Macdonald, about her own life, about T.H. White, whom she talks about. I just wanted more about the hawk. I wanted to know more about the goshawk and less about her. I also don't find a book like The Soul of an Octopus to be very appealing because, again, I think it's because of my science background. Of course, we all share a common ancestor with every organism, including octopuses. But at the same time, a book that's only somewhat about an octopus, but really about humanity and human consciousness, or what we can learn, I don't know. It just seems a little bit, the argument seems specious to me. But I also kind of understand why those books are the most popular. I did notice this when I go to the bookstore. It's very hard to find books that are about animals just exclusively or about conservation. I think because conservation isn't always as lovely as people might think. Conservation often requires doing toxicology tests on the organisms you're studying, other things that people might not necessarily know is part of conservation. I was involved in the conservation, but in toxicology of bees. I say this because it's not something that people realize is part of conservation, but it is, and I understand why these kind of books do not sell as much. They're also not as entertaining because people really want to just learn about themselves and not learn about toads or whatever. Number 9, if you could require the president to read one book, what would it be? Oh gosh, the president. How about The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander? Seeing that he's a racist, The New Jim Crow would really give him a lot of information about how racism is systemic and how it's the system that he is promoting that is continuing racism in this country and how criminal justice is at the center of this. And number 10, what do you plan to read next? Matterhorn, as I said, and maybe a little bit of Roar of the Whales, just because that's somehow appealing to me at the moment, but we will see. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.